Let's try it again. It gives me great pleasure to introduce someone I would call a friend. The Honorable Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, Member of Parliament. Dr. Singh was appointed by President Irfan Ali, His Excellency, a senior minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance in November 2020. This most recent appointment represents Dr. Singh's third term as a Minister of Finance, having previously served in that capacity for 2 terms from 2006 to 2015. Dr. Singh's appointment as Senior Minister in the Office of the President is preceded by a long and distinguished career in public finance, spanning the public service, political office, and international public service. From 1993 to 2001, Dr. Singh was Deputy Auditor General in the Office of the Auditor General. From 2001 to 2006, he served as Director of Budget in the Ministry of Finance. This was followed by the first 2 terms of his ministerial appointment, first by President Bharat Jagdeo in 2006, and then by President Donald Ramotar in 2011. When Dr. Singh demitted ministerial office in 2015, he was recruited by the Fiscal Affairs Department of the International Monetary Fund to provide advice to ministries of finance around the world. During his time there, he worked with a wide range of countries in Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Europe. At the time he left the IMF in 2020, Dr. Singh was coordinating the institution's technical assistance on public financial management across Anglophonic Africa and in selected countries in the Middle East. During his previous ministerial tenure, Dr. Singh's stewardship of the Guyanese economy saw the country achieving 9 years of uninterrupted economic growth, successfully navigating the global financial crisis, as well as several episodes of commodity market price upheaval and other exogenous shocks. That period was characterized by strong private sector confidence and witnessed rapid expansion in private investment in all sectors of the economy. Dr. Singh has a well-established track record of close collaboration with the private sector and has always been an advocate of the private sector and it leading growth and it being a partner in development. And Dr. Singh, I'd like to say, is a highly valued friend to the private sector in Guyana. So please put your hands together and give a round of applause for the Honorable Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that very elaborate introduction. My cabinet colleagues, Ministers Rodriguez and Indar, executives of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry and members of the Chamber, other members of the private sector, ladies and gentlemen of the media, viewers and participants who are joining us remotely, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all thank the leadership and membership of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to join you on this very important occasion of the Chamber's 131st Annual Awards. It has always been my great pleasure to meet with and to work with the membership of the private sector of Guyana throughout the various capacities in which I've had the privilege of serving in Guyana. And over the years, I have worked closely. I've considered myself privileged to have been able to work closely with successive chairpersons of the Private Sector Commission, chairmen, chairpersons, and/or presidents of the various constituent bodies within the Private Sector Commission, not least amongst them the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I recognize in the room more than one past presidents of the Chamber with whom I would have worked over the years and with whom I would have enjoyed several discussions, debates, exchanges of views on the things that matter most to the private sector and to ensuring strong private sector-led growth in the Guyanese economy. But my engagement with the private sector has only spanned perhaps 15 years, somewhere between 15 and 20 years, which indeed represents just a tiny fraction of the Chamber's remarkable history, considering that this is the Chamber's 131st annual ceremony. You just have to look at the logo of the Chamber, the Chamber's banner, to be reminded that the Chamber, your Chamber, has been in existence for 130 years. And if you contemplate for a moment the changes that the world would have seen, the changes that our country would have seen over those 130 years, you would appreciate the magnitude of the achievement as an institution, navigating not only the passage of time, but the vicissitudes of decades and centuries, which would have brought all manner of change and indeed all manner of challenge, and of course, all manner of opportunity over time. And you owe yourselves, and we owe you, special recognition and special salutation for the fact that you have navigated successfully, not 10, not 50, not 100, but 131 years of existence. And I think you owe yourself a special round of applause for that. Consider for a moment how different the world would have been and how different Guyana would have been in 1889. Consider for a moment how different the environment in which your predecessors would have been operating. In 1889, in the 1920s, in the 1940s, in the 1960s, in the 70s and 80s, in the 90s, and now in the times in which we live. And we can think of many examples of things that would have happened, historic moments over this remarkable period that would, without a doubt, like I said earlier, have presented your predecessors with both opportunity and challenge. But if I may do so, I would venture to speculate, I would venture to guess that you, the current cohort of leadership and the membership of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, I would venture a guess that you, the current cohort, are living in the time in which our country will go through more rapid transformation, a steeper and a more rapid transformation than any of your predecessors. I would venture to suggest to you that at no other time in Guyana's history would we have witnessed a sharper and a more rapid transformation than we are about to see. And you're seeing it if you look around. And I have no doubt, as you look amongst your membership, as you hear some of the things that your members, both old and new, are expanding and innovating into, I have no doubt that you are seeing the sharpness and rapidity of this transformation unfolding before your very eyes. This was, I believe, abundantly illustrated if one were to look at the awards that were just given out. And I listened carefully, I looked and I listened carefully at the companies that received the awards. Many of them are new, and many of them are engaging in new sectors, sectors that in some cases did not exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. But they represent today's generation of Guyanese entrepreneurs who spotted an opportunity, invested their capital, took on risk, managed that risk, and have converted their investment into successful and prospering businesses. And they are to be commended. And if I might ask you, perhaps, to offer today's awardees a second and special round of applause. I was particularly pleased to see the number of new and young entrepreneurs who received awards. Notwithstanding my relative youth, I've been around for a few years, and I've navigated successful generations of entrepreneurs in Guyana. Many of you today who are the executives, who are sitting at the head table, sitting at many of the tables, it worries me when I contemplate that I was once sitting at this table with your parents. But it gives me great pride. I see young Gavias laughing. Yeah, I mean, I've been at this table with Jerry. I've been at this table with Eddie, and so many others. And while perhaps from a personal standpoint I might worry about my chronological advancement, I assure you that it pleases me much more greatly than it worries me, because it tells me that Guyana's private sector is in good hands. And that pleases me immensely. It tells me that the work that we did the last time we were in office to create an environment that promoted strong private sector-led growth, that environment was successfully navigated, here again by your predecessors, who laid the foundation for the generation to come after them. That pleases me. It tells me that we must have gotten some things right. And it inspires me with abundant confidence for the future. And so I wish to say to you that we are, and I know it sounds a little bit cliched, and I know it sounds a little bit overused, and I know this has been said many, many times before, but I believe that I can say it today with little fear of contradiction and little fear of being disproven by the events of time yet to come. I believe I can say with abundant confidence that we, today's generation of Guyanese, that we are truly about to witness the transformation that we have heard our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents speak of. I want to say to you, as we approach and navigate this transformation, I want to say to you, on behalf of His Excellency President Ali and his entire government, I want to say to you that you have in us a partner that is truly committed to ensuring the creation, I should say the restoration, and the preservation of an environment that will be genuinely conducive to rapid but sustainable economic growth going forward. I wish to give you that assurance on behalf of His Excellency the President. And by this, what do I mean, or what does such an environment look like? What does it comprise? This is a matter that I could go on about for a very long time. I won't this evening abuse the privilege of your hospitality by going on for too long. But I would like very briefly to mention a few elements of this environment to which I refer. First of all, the preservation of a macroeconomic framework, the preservation of a macroeconomic environment that is friendly to doing business. And this is not a matter of academic interest. This is not a matter that is irrelevant to any of you. This is not a matter that is only the curiosity or the fetish of macroeconomists or of people working in ministries of finance or offices of the president. The macroeconomic environment matters to each and every one of us and each and every one of you. You do business. You know how much the exchange rate matters to you. You do business. You know how much inflation matters to you. You do business. You know how much real GDP growth in the rest of the economy, in the economy that surrounds you, you know how much that matters to you. You know how much a stable, safe, secure, but dynamic financial sector. You know how much that matters to you. You deal with these issues every day. You know how much exchange rate instability would impact you. You know how much interest rate instability would impact you. We as a government have always, both in our previous term in office and indeed since our return, have placed the highest levels of priority and importance on getting the macroeconomic fundamentals right. And we assure you that we will continue to secure the environment as it relates to key macroeconomic indicators so that you don't have to worry about the stability and predictability of the value of your future investments, but instead you can be assured that the macroeconomic environment will continue to be conducive to your investments. If I might give you a small example, those of you who followed the events of Parliament, in fact, such is the importance that we place on our partnership with the private sector that I had to take leave of an ongoing sitting of the National Assembly, and I suspect my colleagues in the cabinet also had to take leave of Parliament to be here. But earlier today in Parliament, I tabled two orders. One, to increase the ceiling for domestic public debt in Guyana, and the second, to increase the ceiling on external public debt in Guyana. And in particular, in relation to external debt, we increased the ceiling today, or we are proposing rather to increase the ceiling from $400 billion to $650 billion. And in the case of in the case of external debt, we increased the ceiling from $400 billion to $650 billion. And in the case of domestic debt, we increased the ceiling from $150 billion to $500 billion. You might ask why I mention this. I mention this because the increase in the ceiling, and I took the opportunity of speaking of this evening because it is of relevance to you for the following reasons. When we came into office, we identified that our predecessors in office had accumulated a vast stock of liabilities that took the form of an overdraft at the central bank, of which much has already been said, liabilities to other suppliers of goods and services, including a staggering liability to the electricity company, the GPL, contingent liabilities that had been contracted, including as a result of government guarantees that had been issued, which, once crystallized, and they have started to crystallize, will result in government debt. And if you were to take stock of the liability of these liabilities, these obligations, that to date we have identified, and they are still being identified, had they been discharged, had these obligations been paid, in other words, had our predecessors not accumulated the overdraft that they accumulated at the central bank, and had they not accumulated the debts that they accumulated, but discharged those debts and avoided the incurrence of the overdraft by raising financing domestically or indeed externally, in fact, the statutory ceiling on domestic debt would have been violated. And so that is the situation that we came into. And we wanted, first of all, to remedy this situation and to ensure that we created a legislative framework to assure that when we borrow, as indeed we will be required to borrow to finance the ambitious development agenda that we have outlined, including some of the things that President Boyer spoke of earlier. We want to make sure that we do so in a manner that does not crowd out credit to the private sector, that does not create a situation where the financial sector is not able to lend to the private sector, that does not create a situation where interest rates become uncompetitive, that does not occur in an environment where borrowing is inflationary and therefore you have price instability, but instead you continue to have an environment characterized by stable prices and by strong and continued growth. And we adjusted the debt ceilings in a way that ensured that our debt continues to be sustainable. And to put things in perspective, the last time the external debt ceiling was adjusted in 1991, it was set at a level that made it equal to 1,027% of GDP. That's the last time that the external debt ceiling was adjusted. When we adjusted it today, we adjusted it to, or when we tabled the order proposing its adjustment, this is going to be debated at the next sitting in Parliament. In contrast to the last time that the ceiling was set, we adjusted it to a level equivalent to 58% of GDP, to put things in relative perspective. As it relates to the domestic ceiling for debt, the last time it was set in 1994, it was set at a level equivalent to 199 to be precise, 199% of GDP. The level that we are proposing is equivalent to 45% of GDP, just to put things in perspective. You run businesses. You understand that as businesses grow, capacity to contract debt increases, but you need to ensure that you contract debt in a sustainable way, because you don't want to get into a situation where you contract a level of debt that you are unable to service your debt. So those of you who manage households, you know that you might borrow, you might incur a loan or a mortgage or credit card debt, but you don't want to incur debt at a level that you will be unable to service, to discharge in the future. Managing the country's debt is no different. And I want to say to you that your government will continue to manage this fiscal operations of our country to ensure that we never return to a time when we are unable to service our debt, which is not such a distant memory. Many of you, notwithstanding your relative youth, can remember such a time. So that's the macroeconomic environment. And my commitment to you on behalf of President Ali is that you can be assured that we will ensure that the macroeconomic fundamentals of our country remain favorable to the environment for doing business. That is the first assurance that I want to give you. Don't panic, it's not the first of many. And I wouldn't necessarily be as expansive on the others as I was on that one. I know that I'm standing between you and dinner. The second assurance that I want to give you is that we recognize the importance of investing in facilitative infrastructure. And I say this particularly because this is an issue that President Boyer mentioned in his speech. My apologies, is it President or Chairman? Chairman, my apologies. But you're President in the other capacity, right? So I mention infrastructure particularly because this is something that Chairman Boyer spoke of. Infrastructure is essential to unlocking the economic potential of our country. We know this. We know how important infrastructure is to your plans for expansion. And if I might mention just a couple of things, for a long time, for as long as I can remember, we've been having conversations about what we need to do to move from being a producer of primary commodities to a producer of downstream manufactured and value-added goods. This has been a conversation that has been going on, indeed, with many of your parents, and perhaps their parents. Without a doubt, the single biggest impediment to value-added manufacturing and processing in Guyana has been the cost of energy, and I believe Nick spoke about that. We have wrestled over the years with a variety of solutions. We've been trying and struggling to fix GPL. We made tremendous progress in our last term of office towards finally achieving a solution to this problem. And by this, I refer to the Amaila Falls hydropower project. And had that project not been frustrated and derailed, Amaila Falls would today have been generating electricity. And we would have achieved this long-awaited reduction in the cost of energy. But let us not dwell unduly or excessively on water under the bridge. If we were to look forward, look ahead, we have put on the fast track our discussions and engagements on delivering, as you know, and many of you are familiar with this, you've been following this very closely, mobilizing the gas resources that we now have available to land on the coast and to harness that resource for the purposes of electricity generation. That we anticipate to be realized within the next 3 years or so. When that happens, you can be assured that there will be a dramatic reduction in the cost of energy, which will immediately create opportunities as it relates to the value-added processing and the value-added production that Nick referred to. We have, in fact, a number of other initiatives that we're working on to also help us to address issues related to competitiveness in energy, including initiatives associated with reducing the losses the GPL has for so long been straddled with, and in fact, including initiatives involving relooking and revisiting the possibilities of Amaila Falls being realized. But we have high on the agenda other infrastructure, including transport infrastructure that is so critical for international connectivity and domestic access and connectivity. Contemplate for a moment the day when you can load your lorry or your container with the products that you've manufactured and drive it eastwards on the bridge across the Quarantine River and into Paramaribo, or drive it south to Lethem, taking advantage of the industrial estate that we're in the process of establishing in Lethem, conveying your goods into northern Brazil, and indeed conveying goods vice versa in the opposite direction. Contemplate for a moment the implications of that international connectivity for the size of the marketplace in which you operate. You know better than we do the advantages of scale. You know better than anybody else what it would mean if you were manufacturing for a market, or if you were harvesting, or if you were providing services for a market that is 2, 3, 4, or 10 times as big as the market in which you're currently operating. And I look forward to the day when I will see your companies establishing a presence in all of our neighbors. You know, some of your predecessors know that, well, that was going to be a family story. I won't tell the family story. I was going to say that when I was a young child, I mean, in fact, you know, I don't want you to leave here curious about what I was going to say. I was going to say that some of your predecessors know that my grandfather used to work with an insurance company called Demerara Mutual Life. And so we used to get Demerara Mutual Life calendars, you know, the calendars that they print every year. So since I was a little child, we used to get Demerara Mutual Life calendars that my grandfather would give to, you know, all of the families, all of the subsets of the family. And we would receive our Demerara Mutual Life calendar around Christmas time. And as a little child, I used to look at this Demerara Mutual Life calendar with wonderment for one reason. I used to see that Demerara Mutual Life had offices across the Caribbean. You know, they had branches and agents in Grenada and in St. Lucia and in so many other countries in the Caribbean. I believe they still have. And I used to look at it with great pride. I used to think, you know, Demerara Life, that's my grandfather's company. And look, they have branches throughout the Caribbean. It was a matter of great personal pride for me. I didn't quite understand, I suspect that I didn't quite understand at that age what national pride meant. But I will say now that I look forward to the day when I can pick up the calendars. I don't know if, people still print calendars. I look forward to the day when I pick up the calendars that some of you would have published, or I visit your websites, or I see your electronic publications, and I see you having presence across the region. I look forward to the day when you will move from being a Guyanese company to a regional conglomerate and a hemispheric conglomerate. And you might think this sounds like a fanciful dream. You might think this might sound like what in the Creole vernacular we might call old gaff. But I will say this, that if Demerara Life could have done it nearly 100 years ago, it would be a crying shame if we couldn't do it today, particularly given the opportunities that are before us. And I look forward to the day when I will see your membership and other Guyanese companies becoming the conglomerates of the region and the conglomerates of the hemisphere. In addition to infrastructure, we will continue to invest in the things that matter to you, ensuring the availability of a skilled workforce, investing heavily in education. We know how important access to skilled labor is, to qualified personnel. We will do our part. We will continue to invest heavily in infrastructure. But I urge you too to do your part, because skilled labor doesn't only come out the doors of our schools and our universities. You know from your personal experience how some of you emerged from the ranks of your own businesses to head large companies. And so I urge you also to consider what you can do as Guyanese companies to cultivate a well-skilled workforce. Some of you do training as a business. Some of you have the potential. Some of you employ young people, either as staff or under some kind of apprenticeship arrangement. I challenge you, I exhort you, that the task of creating the workforce of tomorrow is not only a responsibility that rests with the government. Our schools and universities will do its part. We will do all that we can to have our institutions of learning do our part. But I urge you to reflect on how you can contribute to cultivating the workforce of tomorrow. The workforce that is required to have the skills of tomorrow. Understanding entrepreneurship and risk-taking and risk management. And I'm going to come back and probably end on that note. Understanding the directions in which the economy of today will be going as it becomes the economy of tomorrow. Managing people in an increasingly diverse environment, including in the context of Guyana's new role as a regional hub for economic activity and potentially Guyana's role as a focal point for global attention and global interest. Today's visitors to Guyana are largely international visitors. There was a time when, if you looked at the profile of visitors to Guyana, they were primarily diasporic visitors. Today's visitors to Guyana are largely right now business travelers who expect a particular level of service, who expect a particular level of efficiency, and whose loyalty both to the country and to your enterprises will depend on the quality of service they enjoy. We speak of local content, and you know that we have committed to concluding a local content policy that will secure the interests of the domestic private sector. But I will say this to you. It is incumbent on the domestic private sector to ensure that you are producing at the level and at the quality and with the reliability and at the standards that are expected of those who will be purchasing from you. And that is not something that government can do for you. And so you have an extremely important role to play in realizing this exciting transformation to which I referred earlier and which we're all awaiting. My final word to you, or my final 2 words to you, will be firstly to reiterate what I said earlier. We are and we pride ourselves as being a business-friendly environment. It's not an accident that 3 members of the cabinet left the parliament to be here this evening. And I should say that very carefully because I don't intend any disrespect to the parliament, of course. But we pride ourselves as a business-friendly government. And I want to say that to you in unequivocal and emphatic terms. And secondly, I want to say to you, as the captains of industry and commerce, that this is the moment in Guyana. This is the moment for boldness. This is the moment for boldness. Not throwing caution to the wind, but this is the moment for boldness. This is the moment for you to actively examine The new and emerging opportunities, some might be obvious, but many will be less obvious. This is the moment for you to sit down and actively seek out the opportunities that perhaps are not so obvious. This is the moment for you to consider what you need to do to reinvent where reinvention is necessary, to position yourselves to realize the opportunities and the advantages that tomorrow have in store for us. And this, I wish to urge you to consider. Ladies and gentlemen, considering that you already have the menu before you, and some of you perhaps might have already selected your choices, and you might perhaps be wondering, when on earth would I step away from this podium so that you can get on with that sumptuous starter that you selected 2 hours ago? You have been an incredibly patient audience. I thank you for that, and I say to you, I look forward, and on the President's behalf, we look forward to working incredibly closely with you. Congratulations to you on achieving, I don't know if it's your 131st anniversary, but congratulations to you for achieving 131 years of existence. Congratulations to the awardees this evening. And I really do want you to take very seriously what I said. I look forward to that calendar or that website when I will see your presence around the region and around the world. Thank you very much.